Let's begin now.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. This is Drew, and I will be hosting this evening. Axis is under the weather, so we got a nice fill-in for you to talk about the American Express, previously the Desert Classic, previously the Career Builder, I think, previously the Bob Hope Classic. All kinds of names for this guy, or for this tournament. But the guy that's going to help us preview this event is none other than the famous Nick Varone, goes by DFS handle Nick Varone. Nick, how's it going?
Yeah, really,
I gotta throw
really
that
original,
out there. Yeah,
really original screen name. Really just mailed that one in. But anyway, thanks for having me. This tournament will forever be known as the Bob Hope. It is of no other name. There is no the American Express, which is one of the worst tournament names on tour. Happy to be here and looking forward to it.
Yeah, you were certainly a name around our Slack and the live stream on Wednesday night, being the Bo Hoag Whisperer. I hope it's Hoag. Axis said Hoag last night, but I was like, that's a cool name, but I don't think that's right. Go into a bar and be like, my name is Mr. Hoag.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea, but I would have said Hoag.
I think it's Hoag. But yeah, tell us just for a quick second, because I think from the live stream, you like to find little gems every single week. You dig pretty deep and you find these guys. And he played really well round one. We looked at him. He was probably one of the top plays for round two in Showdown, and he was still like $6,400 or something. Played really well. Round three, fire him up. Round four, played pretty solid. So, what's your deal with Bo Hoag? What do we miss?
So for those who don't know, I played Bo Hoag in cash last week. So if anybody wants to go and scoop my games in the lobby, you can go ahead. I got them posted, some head-to-heads out there. But so I played Bo Hoag in cash, and I had almost 20% Bo Hoag over 150 lineups in GPPs. And then one of the reasons why, I guess I got there was just price was kind of the principal thing. I thought there was a big gap between the top. I turned out to be kind of wrong, but I thought there was a big gap in terms of quality of play from kind of that top echelon of players into the 8K range. And one of the things that forced me to do was either to spread out down in the 6K range or try to find some differentiating factors. So I looked at guys, especially in kind of that like 6,500 or lower, and just figured I could, if I could get some made cuts, especially in cash where it was going to be a disaster anyway with the wind. So increased variance with a little bit riskier of a play with birdie making with guy who has made cuts, and looking at 6.2K, and he showed up on my cash team. So that was that.
I like it. So I know you don't like talking about the previous event too much, but we have to. If you're going to bring up salary, talking about top of the salary board, and for a guy like you is obviously sharp. I've seen your Facebook ads for people to scoop your head-to-heads. Where did you go last week? I think a lot of people had a decision to make with JT coming off a win, being so so highly priced. Did you have any strong leans or maybe a last-minute decision that high-end price for him versus paying down a little bit? I know 150 lineups, you could probably have a sprinkle here and there. But overall, what was your thoughts just on his price and coming in off a win? Anything stand out?
Yeah, sure. For him in particular, it really was I wanted a made cut at that level. I played Morikawa and Matsuyama both in cash. Matsuyama was a differentiator, and Morikawa I knew it was going to be chalk, but I thought he was such a good play anyway that I had him everywhere.
Yeah.
So I knew that I wanted to go two high-end guys, and one of the things, like I said, that forces you to do is to go low. And if I'm going to go that low, especially in cash, I want the cut made. That strategy differentiates a little bit for this week, or differs a little bit for this week. And we can talk about that a little bit, but for last week, I knew that it was going to be kind of a shit show, so I could go down to 6.2 and not feel like I'm losing too much equity compared to the low 7K range, especially because last week I thought that the 7K range was kind of a disaster. So I think I had 18 guys in the 6K range in my player pool. in order to be more spread out around the top. So that was kind of the play there, and really the whole strategy for the week. I don't know if you know, like Manny Laura from Fantasy Cruncher. He talks about like where you should spend the most amount of your time on like the most difficult portion, like position for football. But I think for golf, it's more about salary ranges and deciding like, hey, where am I going to grind over? If I know that I like 2 guys in the 8K range, I'm not going to spend 6 hours going over the rest of the 8K range. I'm going to focus on those guys and then spend my time elsewhere.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. And I think we like 2 points on that. And we kind of talked about this yesterday. So we do a recap podcast for the listeners. Sunday night after the tournament concludes, we do a quick recap of the tournament, and then do a couple Q&As. But like, I do think when you're looking down at the low end, in the like last week, you talk about, let's just say cut equity. Like win equity might be a little bit different topic. There could be some guys you could argue they have some win equity, but when you look at like the low 6K range to the low 7K range, and it's $1,000 difference, we'll say, it really allows you to do more things with the top range. And then at your same point with, spending more time in the 6Ks or, in the value plays that you want to spend your time in due to your roster construction, if guys spend the majority of their time trying to figure out like who's the one guy I want to fade in the 10K range, or I need to cut out 2 or 3 guys in the 9K range. Well, if you still have a good chunk of guys up there, whatever lineup optimizer you're going to use is probably going to throw in a ton of 6Ks. You probably want to pay attention to what your exposures are down there, because that's probably going to make or break your week. The projections can be way off depending on how much they've played recently. But yeah, if you're 100% right, because like you don't want to be too overexposed down there, but there is opportunities for value. You just got to be a little bit more critical of where you want to kind of plant your flag a little bit.
Yeah, you also have to understand the risk too, because you're not. I mean, playing a guy like Hoag in 6.2K, I knew what I was getting into. I wasn't under some delusion that this guy was like a lock to make the cut or something like that. Like I knew that if he makes the cut, he has realistic top 20 upside. He'd shown it at 2 of the last 5 tournaments he was in, and I knew that if he made the cut and could get there, I knew that he had a decent shot to at least, a meeting value was making the cut. So if he makes the cut, then it makes sense for me to get everything else kind of in place, especially because, like I said, I really, really, really didn't like the low to mid 7K range. So that forced me to drop. And when I drop, that means that I know that I'm going to inherently take more risk. But if I thought that the risk exposure for the low 7K and even the low 6K was the same, like I said, I had 18 guys in the 6K range in my player pool. I think last week it was either 14 or 18. And part of the reason was because I didn't like that 7K, and I knew that the guys up top were such a tier above everybody else. Then it just forced me to spread out in the 6K range versus gamble with have the same risk exposure theoretically or potentially, I guess, in the low 7K that I didn't like.
But I mean, like Berger was in the low 7K, so like you could pretty much been 100% right there and just.
I knew you were going to say that.
I won't get into it.
Yeah, exactly. Just tee that one up for you.
But he's setting himself up this week to disappoint again. Although he didn't really disappoint too much last week. We'll let that one pass. But yeah, man, that's a good kind of thought on overall. We'll consider that process, looking at the way the salaries break out and kind of your interpretation, because I'm sure everyone has a slightly different take on if they think certain values or certain ranges are viable. And so I like that. This week we got a pretty big field, obviously a lot of guys in the 6K range, and we kind of talked pre-show of there's a lot of different options to go. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and dive in and talk through the course. I should say courses. There's 3 in the rotation this week. Won't spend too much time there. I mean, I don't know if you have a take on it, Nick, but it's really tough to honestly, the courses are pretty similar in their difficulty. They're all pretty easy, but I don't know if you're really trying to split hairs between looking at certain statistics for one course. Most of our strokes gain data comes from all the strokes gain data comes from the stadium course. I think you're just looking at a whole, maybe a longer term sample, kind of like last week where guys have had a pretty big gap between tournaments, but there's some course history for guys, but over a course of 3 different days, 3 different courses for the first 3 days, it's kind of hit or miss with what you can really split hairs about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a little bit of a difference for Showdown. I think, and I'm no Showdown expert, but I like to dip my toe in every once in a while. And I think that the big differentiator to this week is going to be, so the 3 courses you can talk about them, but the La Quinta, Nicholas, and Stadium course designed by Pete Dye, RIP. And that's like the toughest of the 3. So if I'm doing Showdown, I'm on the other 2 basically, unless there's weather concerns. I'm basically staying in La Quinta and Nicholas, and then I'll fade a lot of the Stadium stuff. And I think that's where a lot of the public's going to go too, because everybody's going to talk about that. But I also think that there is enough of a difference, but not between La Quinta and Nicholas to me.
No, from a birdie standpoint, it's pretty similar. It's just the difficulty on a few holes for the Stadium, or I'm guessing probably I didn't look it up, but I'm guessing the double bogeys and worse are a little bit higher, a higher rate on the Stadium course than La Quinta and Nicholas. But we'll go ahead and dive into it really quick and just kind of get a high-level picture of this. Again, it's 3 different courses, as Nick mentioned. The Stadium course, La Quinta, and you have the Nicholas. Looking at scoring averages, I'll just run down I'll run down 3 as we go across here. That'd probably give you a better idea. So the Stadium course, 70 stroke average, and I'm just looking at last year's data just to get a quick sample. La Quinta was 68.72, so about a stroke and a half better. And Nicholas was 69, so also about a stroke better. A full stroke better. Birdie average was about the same, so that's kind of what I was alluding to as far as the scoring opportunities. It was 4.3, 4.9, 4.9, pretty close. The green regulation's a big difference. It's 68%. Stadium's pretty low. La Quinta and Nicholas is really high, 72, 72. And looking at driving distance and accuracy, it's really pretty close for both courses, or for all 3 courses. Driving accuracy on the Stadiums was slightly lower at 57.5%, and La Quinta Nicholas at 65%. So I mean, overall, like I said, you're trying to look at the 3 courses. I think you're just taking a bigger picture of how someone's playing coming into this event. For me, it's looking at birdie or better, a lot of the key scoring stats like that. I did see approach is really important. So off the tee, obviously, with 288 yards being the driving distance, there's not a huge advantage to be gained. If you look at the leaderboard last year, if you look at the strokes gained off the tee stats for last year, it was John Rahm, I think, led, but he pretty much leads off the tee in every single event he plays. He ended up finishing top 5, but I mean, that's pretty much expected, and he's pretty much expected to finish in the top for off the tee. So for me, looking at green and regulation, looking at a medium to longer term sample, birdie average is a good one, and then strokes gained approach is pretty high. I was trying to give an idea for approaches, and we only have the data for Stadium, so I'm not really going to weigh that much. But I think just looking at scores, I think we've seen really low scores here over the years. I think if you can find guys that are going to come in hot with some birdies, that's probably the route that'll get you to a good finish in a GPP at least. Any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think if you go to, whether it be on Fantasy Golf Bag or whether it be on Fantasy Labs or whether it be on Fantasy National, and you go and you sort birdie or better, and you want to know who's going to be the most popular plays this week, that's probably a good indication. Is just sort that stat and see where everybody pops out, because I think that everybody, especially for year to date stats and like maybe last 24 rounds, I think everybody's going to sort birdie or better and just see kind of where they all shake out. So if you're looking to fade the chalk, find some guys maybe not towards the top of that range, who may have similar win equity. That would be my first 2 cents. Actually, I looked back at my last year's notes, and actually the year before that's notes. God, I've been doing this for a while. And literally the first 2 bullets in both of my notes were, man, this is a birdie fest, and don't have your guys blow up on the Stadium course. That was the first 2 bullets on the last each year's notes. And I think that's exactly what you just said of, 3 courses. Yeah, there are birdie opportunities on all 3. overall scoring probably a little bit better on the La Quinta and Nicholas, and it's literally just don't blow up on the stadium course and you have a shot. And I think that's pretty commensurate with how most of the field is going to look this week, and that's going to be tough if like trying to find an edge away from that.
Yeah, I was thinking through this earlier when I was looking through some of the key stats, just mainly scoring average and birdie average. So like I said, the birdie average is pretty close. But I do think, and interested in your take, but this may just be from playing golf in some of these tournaments, I do think that guys starting off on the easier course have a little bit of an advantage due to their, we'll say their attention for the second and third round. So, some guy, like you said, if they blow up on the stadium in round 1, they know they got scoring opportunities on round 2 and 3, but it's going to be really tough to come back from that and keep the focus to actually play smart. If the guys start off on La Quinta and they're the top 10, top 30 or something like that, they probably have a little bit more motivation. They're probably going to be taking a little bit more time thinking through their shots because they're closer to the lead. So I do think getting off to a good start is important in this event. I didn't look at weather, so I don't know about weather splits, but I do think anytime you've seen guys, typically you'll see a scrub that pops up for a first round lead, but usually you get some of these mid-price guys and the upper-price guys start off well. They tend to finish pretty well.
Yeah, I would say that intuitively makes sense to me.
You're not going to exclude people from stadium, but maybe
so that's what I was trying to formulate there. I think that intuitively makes sense to me. I'm not specifically, and it's kind of how I work most of my lineups anyway, whether it be for ownership or for a particular stat. I'm not particularly Xing guys out because they're not starting on La Quinta or whatever the first 2 easiest courses are. But if you tell me, this guy's on stadium, he's a borderline, like stadium to start, and he's a borderline play, maybe I X him out. But I'm not chasing that.
Yeah.
I don't remember who it was. Oh, it might have been Rick Run Good on Twitter today, I think, posted something about that, and how it was like it's noisy data, and Axis talks about this all the time. I'm like, whenever you see somebody's stats, make sure you're checking, verifying, but also is this stat really meaningful, or is it just a stat to be a stat? And like I said, I think intuitively it makes sense to what you said of starting off an easier course, maybe he's in a better position after day 1 and then a little bit more focused. Like intuitively, yeah, that makes sense to me. There is some data to back it up, but I'm not exactly chasing that. No. But it's a factor.
I would consider it more of like a tie break. For me, same with weather splits. And if you're running 150 lineups, I'm sure you run groups with certain tee time splits, maybe opposite tee time splits. But it is something for me if you are building a cash lineup. If I was down in the low 7K range, maybe the 6K range, maybe I would take a look at, are they starting on La Quinta or the Nicholas? Maybe give a slight bump to that. But as far as a player pool, I don't think it's going to be, 100%. I'm not going to exclude someone because they're starting on the stadium. That's always a very tertiary type of thought. Like late Wednesday night, just trying to formulate some lineups. Maybe I look to that.
Yeah, and here's another thing that I kind of rope in there too, and this is way out of left field, but have you heard the Canadian narrative on this course yet, or in this tournament?
No.
every year, and I apologize to everybody who brings this up, I love you all, but every year people bring up that this is like a popular vacation spot for Canadians. So like Adam Hadwin plays really well here. He has 3 of the last 4 years or something, and people every year bring up, man, this is a Canadian vacation spot. Like people go there all the time, and it's a really hot spot, and the Canadians turn out for the Canadian players. And I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I mean,
no.
Kind of is what it is, but I just had to get that off my chest. I feel like every year I hear the same thing. I had my notes and I looked up and I was like, man, Canadian vacation spot. Let's go. Light me up some. Is Fenton in the field this week? No.
He should be.
Yeah, he might be. Anyway, please nobody mention.
Howland's not playing either.
Svensson, I don't think he's in the field. But anyway.
I'm not going to completely discount it, but there's just too small of a sample. I will say there are some courses on tour where the Australians tend to like rise to the top. Or like, and there's so few that like it could be just coincidence that they happen to play good. Like if last week Kisner and we'll say Brendan Steele, like, oh yeah, they're both from Georgia. I'm not going to say it's a Georgia track all of a sudden. So just keep that definitely with a grain of salt. I wouldn't say there's really any national narratives besides maybe Ireland for the Irish Open or British Open.
Yeah.
So
had to get that off my chest so you can move forward now.
Yeah, don't worry. I don't have any Canadian narratives going on for my cheat sheet today. So, all right, let's go ahead and again, trying to keep these podcasts nice and short. So we'll go ahead and start with the top range. I'll go ahead and lead off and just kind of give you an idea of where I'm looking. You got Ricky Fowler 11.5. Again, we're looking at DraftKings pricing for simplicity. Sung J M at 11,000. Paul Casey at 10.7. Tony Finau 10.5. Ben on 10.3 and Charles Howell 10.1. I don't know about you, man, but I did see that Paul Casey has decent win equity according to some books and according to some other resources that I use. But I just don't see many guys besides like Sung Jae and Ricky really having win equity up here. So I don't know how many guys I'm going to pay up for. Charles Howell third, I see he's going to make the cut. He's not going to win. And at his price, I just don't see it. But Sung Jae's probably going to be the most interesting coming off of last week. Played really solid. Ricky at 11.5. We haven't seen him play here in a long time. He is the class of the field. But again, with not seeing him play this course in a while, not seeing him play since the Tournament of Champions, I'd probably just skip this entire range and maybe play Sung Jae and just assume his win is coming soon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I think Sung Jae is going to be the most popular guy in the 10K range. I don't think I'm shocking anybody by saying that. I have him projected above 20%. He's the only guy in the 10K range I have projected above 20%. I know you're getting your feet wet in the projection game, so I'll defer to you on Wednesday to see kind of where they land out. But I have Sung Jae projected the highest. I like him a lot. I don't know if I'm going to go there. I'll probably be underweight if we're being honest, over 150 lineups. If I were playing 3 max or something, I probably would just avoid this entire range. Yeah. MME at 150 lineups, I'm probably going to be overweight Ricky. I don't see Ricky being terribly popular. He rates out okay for me. I mean, again, like you said, he's the class of the field. He should just destroy all of these courses. I love him on P-tie tracks. Anything where a golfer has to actually think before they hit the ball. I think Ricky is one of the best at that. Kind of like an unheralded one of the best, and it sounds stupid because he doesn't have a major, but so I like Ricky on P-tie tracks and anything where long irons are into play and you actually have to think. I also think he can make a ton of birdies, but he's 11.5. So again, if I'm playing 3 max or even 20 max, I'm probably staying away from a lot of these guys. You could sell me on any of them except for maybe CH3. He's just, his win equity is just not there. Yeah. Like, it's just, his birdie equity is not there. His win equity is not there. That is an actual lock button fade for me. So
yeah, if he goes off and wins this thing, then kudos. But there's like no shot that it doesn't make sense. If he was 9K, it's a different story. But 10-1 with the guys
I'll
just
let my
above
money
him.
On fire. That's fine. And you know what? In sneak peek, I'm going to say the same thing for Kisner. So it's kind of like if he wins, like, congrats. You know, that's it. Okay, bye. Next week.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
But but the other 5 guys, I like Ben on a lot. I like Finau a lot. It's just a matter of price and whether or not you want to fit them and how much you like the 9K range, and we can talk about that too.
Do you have a take on the pricing this week? Like last week, in my opinion, it was pretty good. I know you had a ton of guys in the 6K, but like this week, I feel like it's a lot softer. Like just going down the board, I can pretty much find, quote unquote, good plays throughout the entire pricing. Last week was a little bit tougher to like really feel confident about, unchecking somebody or checking somebody.
Yeah, I would say this pricing this week is really soft. I mean, sneak peek for later. I had 12 guys starred for the 7K range, and I had to like stop myself because I knew that I couldn't list off 12 guys on a podcast. Like it was kind of absurd where I got down to that 7K range and I was like, oh, I can play all these guys and have like 5K left over. And so I'm totally, I totally agree. I think pricing's pretty soft this week. That's why I don't mind Ricky. Because if he is the class of this field and I can just jam in 7K guys with him or 7K range guys with him and have a pretty goddamn good lineup, then, light it up. Let's go.
I think at the Tournament of Champions, because it's like 30 guys, Crack Drafter in the FGB Slack, he DM'd me and was like, hey, just between you and me, don't you think it's like too much to have 5 guys? You pretty much listed 5 guys over 9K as a core play. And I was like, I mean, realistically, dude, they could all win. Like 9K was, some really good player. I don't even remember who it was, but like from 9K to JT, yeah, I'm not excluding anyone. I was excluding like 2 people, and it was just on ownership, like Woodland and someone else. But yeah, this week is a little different. Like once you get into these full fields, the core starts to transition quite a bit to more, prudent roster construction.
Yeah, and I'll go off on a little tangent of that on just process, I guess, of I think and I talked to Jacob a little bit about this in DMs too, of like your process and your entire lineup construction really depends on your own risk tolerance. So if you're playing like 3 lineups, like, yeah, you're going to fade everybody except for, maybe 10 guys, 12 guys or something. And if you're playing 150 lineups, or you're just looking to narrow down a pool to then select from, then your risk tolerance will greatly vary depending on, do you want to just lock Ricky and then build in everybody else around him? Because if you're doing that, then you're probably not playing any of this 10K range. And if you're going to or the 9K range for that matter, you might mix in a guy or 2, but you're probably getting away from that. Whereas last week, especially, I thought that the top range was pretty fair win equity across the board, other than JT, who ended up burning everybody. So you could spread it out and then just gamble with some 6K guys over 150 teams. Whereas this week, like, yeah, I think Ricky's the class of the field, but you also, like I said, you could sell me on a lot of these guys in the 10K and the 9K range if you want to move down to that too. Yeah. I mean, like Scotty Scheffler is going to be chalk. I hate to break it to everybody who's been telling me that Scotty Scheffler is the play this week, but he's going to be chalk. He's going to be the most popular guy.
It's really hard for me to skip out on this chalk, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Me too. He's the top-rated guy in my labs model.
He's going to win very soon. He might win before Sungjae.
Yeah, Jesus. Oh, man. And Sungjae he's so good.
He is, but I mean, Scotty's good.
Yeah.
I mean, you compare Korn Ferry Tour seasons. Yeah, Sungjae might have finished ahead of him, like technically, in the year that he graduated, but I would put Scotty pretty close to him.
Well, I mean, didn't Sungjae win like 4 times that year?
3 times, I think.
3. Sorry. And but anyway, yeah. So I mean, you look at the 9K range. Scotty's going to be chalk, and I'm fine with that. I'm going to probably be either equal or overweight on him. I mean, his birdie rate I have it second in the field. So behind another 9K guy who is my pivot and who will probably also be a little bit chalky, but probably won't exceed mid-teens, is Matt Wolf. He's probably the guy that I'm going to take a bit of a stand on. I think that he should destroy this course too. Basically across the board and everything that I'm looking at, he is at least top. I think it's like top 8 in all the stat categories as it pertains to this course for me.
Yeah, he was one of the few that I felt like he was overpriced. Off the tee, does a lot of damage, but approach is always a little bit hit or miss. So that was the reason why I kind of left him off. I think Scheffler, you're right. $9,500 for him, I think, is a fair price, and I think it's a price that I'm willing to pay, even if he's going to be 25, 28%. And again, kind of like to touch on, you're talking about 3 max versus 150 lineups. Like, you could make your stands however you want in that different contest selection. The guy that's interesting to me that I didn't realize played as much, Molinari played here back in 2015 through 2017. 2 top 12s and then a made cut, finished 62nd. But he's really been playing rough over there on the European Tour. But I'm willing to kind of eat it this week at his price for a guy that's probably, if he's playing well in this field, he has as good a chance as anybody to win too. We haven't seen him play in a long time, so he's one of the few that I do like in this range. The other one that I have checked is Kokrak, and he is going to screw me out of so much money this year, but I'm willing to give it a shot this week. 8th 2 years ago, 18th last year. We haven't seen him play since the beginning of the fall swing, I think.
So he scares the hell out of me because he is currently ranking second in my labs model behind Scheffler.
He had such a good year last year. I mean, he rose up.
But the reason
everywhere.
why it's terrifying is because I don't know what his win equity is, and at 9,100, it's tough. I mean, I'm gonna probably play him, and his birdie rate is insane, so that's good. But I'm a little hesitant because I don't know if he can win. And I'm not saying that you need to win if you're at 9K or 9,100 or whatever he is, but
yeah,
it is a little worrying that I don't know what his win equity is. If I thought it was anywhere close to higher, then I'd be probably all in.
Okay, so I can see the comparison. Like, you see Wolf has a lot higher win equity. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And if I look at, so I have my labs model open right now, and like across the board for stats wise, they're very, very close on every single stat except for scrambling, which Wolf is worse at, and everything else they're like 1A, 1B type of a deal.
Yeah,
over the last 75 weeks, which doesn't have a ton of tournaments for Wolf, but besides the point.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Like Wolf, so I just run a quick comparison when pricing first comes out and the odds come out. And usually the early in the year, DK pretty much reflects exactly what the odds are. But yeah, Wolf is 95th percentile for win equity, and Kokrak's 91st. So a little bit of a difference there, and reverse pricing. So I can see what you're saying. But I mean, in realistic terms, if you had, like, I use this stupid analogy all the time, but if you and I went out to the golf course and you had to pick between those two to win the tournament, yeah, Wolf's probably your guy. I mean, he's probably got higher win equity in real life.
Yeah, I mean, and here's, we're split. One of the main overriding things here is that I think we're splitting hairs too, because I do like them both, and that's kind of the overarching thing. Molinari I can't get behind, but I'm with you on Kokrak. I think having, like I said, they're so close in all these stat categories that it goes back to my original point of where do we want to spend our time, and if I'm not going to split my hairs between Wolf and Kokrak, I'm probably going to play them both in the same lineup. So, and like if I'm playing 3-max, they are a pretty damn good starting piece to get away from Scheffler, who is going to be chalking single entry and 3-max.
That's what I'm going to say. It's probably pretty contrarian. Yep. I will, in my defense, say Molinari has the same win equity, technically, by the books, as Wolf. So I got that going for me.
Sorry.
I'm not saying the books are right. Just saying that someone agrees. All right. That's pretty much it for me. Horschel, you mentioned Kisner a little bit, and then Cameron Champ. Those are the three guys that are out of me, out of my pool for now.
So I'm on Horschel for what it's worth.
Do you
Horschel's
like Horschel
my guy.
this week? Okay.
Horschel's my guy. He's really expensive, and I recognize that. I'll probably have a clip. I'm not all in on him. I'm probably just gonna have enough where I'll probably be a little bit overweight, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Because I do like a lot of 6K, so I can jam a couple of guys. So I will say that Horschel will be in my player. Horschel will be in my player pool. The rest of this range, meh.
Yeah, I like Billy Horschel. He's like a less cheating version of Patrick Reed. Like he tries really hard. He just doesn't cheat when he does. At least we don't know that. But I like Billy Horschel. I don't mind playing him.
Yeah.
So
I mean, good birdie rate and all that jazz. So.
I mean, he's a good player. I mean, you win the FedEx Cup. That's pretty good on your resume.
Did you see who called it? Was it I don't remember if it was golf.com or Golf Digest. They called winning the FedEx Cup a major championship.
I did not see that.
There was I'll retweet or find the tweet. Somebody highlighted it earlier today that they called winning the FedEx Cup in, I think it was 2014, a major. I was like, oh my God, here we go.
I mean, it's a major paycheck, but it's definitely not a major.
Well, yeah.
God.
Anyway.
I mean, Bill Haas won the freaking FedEx Cup. He ain't a major winner.
By the way, he won here.
I did see that, and he had a couple other good finishes, but he won here twice, actually.
Yeah.
So you could tell me if you're playing him. I'm not sure I can go to that. I can usually do some win ups, like upside. I played Henley last week, which sucked, but all right, let's move down to the 8K range. We got plenty of your 30 guys to talk about in the 6K range.
Sure.
So as we go down to the 8K range, I'm going to stick with Brendan Todd this week, 8,800. Coming off of last week, and I had his stats pulled up from the Sony Open, and he gained 1.5 strokes, just over 1.5 strokes on approach, just 1.5 strokes over, just over 1.5 strokes off the tee. I do think he's playing really good. We kind of talked about on the podcast last week. The whole Tournament of Champions, he played pretty bad, and it was kind of course fit, somewhat course field strength. He played well last week for the most part, and I do think he's going to play good again at this golf course. We saw him surprisingly back in 2011. He has won this event.
Oh my gosh!
Did you know
they weren't even were they even at Stadium Course at that time?
I think so. The stadium, I think, has been around for a while.
All right.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the rotation has been there. Because back in the day, man, this was like a 5-day event, if I'm not mistaken. I think they started the event on Wednesday when it was the Bob Hope.
I don't want to challenge you directly on the podcast, but I'm pretty sure they didn't play at this course then.
Okay, well, doesn't take me away from Brendan Todd. Sign me up. So
they were at La Quinta then.
Was it 100% La Quinta?
La Quinta was no. So La Quinta, so I just had to look it up. So La Quinta, they've played it 46 times at La Quinta, but PGA West, which is Nicklaus and the Stadium Course, they've only played since 2016, and they played the Stadium Course in 1987, and then from 2016 on. So he was only at La Quinta and Silver Rock Resort. And then there might have been another one in there, but yeah. So take that with a grain of salt. But
okay.
The Brendan Todd's Stadium Course.
I'll take away the prior winner, but I still like him this week. The other two as we go down, Brian Harman looks interesting, but I don't have him marked. I do like Alexander Noren quite a bit. Played really well last week, coming from the European Tour. If you followed along, so I know you're a European Tour fan, but like if you followed along when he transitioned back from the PGA Tour after, it might have been like one event in the FedEx Cup playoffs or after the PGA Championship, or not the PGA Championship, the British Open, when he moved back and was playing full-time on the European Tour. He really started playing well again for some reason. Came back last week. He's been playing good. I like him here. Ryan Moore, same reason. Just a very good ball striker, very accurate, hits a lot of greens. I think 8,300 for him is a really safe target too, like in cash. I think that's probably a safer target. And same with Knox. Knox is the other one, 8,100. Lucas Glover, I think, is Axe's favorite play every single week. He tees it up, it seems, but dude, Glover just irks the shit out of me. So I'll stick with Knox and Ryan Moore. And it's weird when you get through these different ranges where you look at like safety versus upside. And I would agree, like Knox has really been capped for his upside on the PGA Tour, but when you look through how many cuts he makes, his ball striking stats, a lot of stuff lines up for him. Same with Ryan Moore, although Ryan Moore will throw in a freaking missed cut on the John Deere Classic, which makes no sense to me. But who do you like in the 8K range?
So I'm gonna be a nice courteous guest for everybody else listening to this podcast, in that I don't really like anybody.
Okay.
No, I mean, like I'll probably have a sprinkle over 150 lineups. If I were building 3 max or 20 max, I probably wouldn't have any of these guys. I agree with you on Noren. I agree with you on Harman. I think I actually like Glover too, but for real, like to actually, for me to say that I like a guy, it means that I'm probably going to have like 20+% of them, and I'm probably not going to have 20% of any of these guys. I think okay. I'll probably have a sprinkle because I'm going to need to differentiate in the middle, just over my lineup build. So everybody who goes and audits my lineups after I talk on this podcast, they can see I'm going to probably have a sprinkle of a couple of these guys. But really, if I'm building for this week, we talked a little bit before the pod too that I love a lot of these 7K guys. So what's going to happen is I'm probably not going to end up with too much of the 8K. I mean, we could go down the list and you could probably sell me on a lot of them, if not all of them. But I'm probably not going to end up with anywhere close to 20% of any of these guys. And I'm just going to move on. And I think that again speaks to how I see the overall field this week versus, like I said last week. I think the 8K range is a lot of guys. Like I said, you could sell me on them. I know Brendan Todd's been on fire and a couple wins in the early part of the season. And a couple of these other guys, like I played Harmon last week. I like him a lot. I always like JT Poston because I think his putter is just so good and he can make birdies. So like, yeah, they're all fine and you can convince me on any of them, but it goes back to win equity that I just don't know. Norin I like, and it's all fine, but I'm probably going to end up either underweight or fading most of them. I might be equal weight on a couple, but for the most part, like, again, it goes back to if I'm going to recommend a guy, I'm going to probably be because my Bo Hoag call last week. Like, I recommended him, I played him in cash, and I played him 18% in GPPs. And
you hit him in plain sight.
What?
You hit him in plain sight.
Yeah, and I mean, this week, there's nobody in this range that is going to be close to that for me in the 8K range.
All right, well, let's do this. I'll go ahead and so like there's really only a couple guys, like you mentioned, a bunch of guys in the 7K, and I would mostly agree with that. There's plenty of guys that are in play. There's only a few that I really starred that were worth mentioning on the podcast for looking to play this week. Going to start with Berger, 7,500. So I'll list these guys out.
I tell you.
Yeah, I know. So I'll list these guys out, and then I'll let you kind of fill in the gaps with the guys you do want to mention for time's sake for your own lineups and stuff and such. But yeah, so Daniel Berger, 7,500. And man, I liked him last week. Everyone knows it. I think Orange Man knows it. And honestly, man, 38th place finish for where he was priced at. It's not really the end of the world. Like, made cut, even though he snuck through there. Really not that bad. He finished 12th here last year, and that was like his first event back after wrist surgery, I think, or wrist injury. But I do like him here. Good with his ball striking, good with his irons. And the other guy at this top range is going to be Harris English, and his birdie or better rate's been a lot better in the last, the last half of the year. Noto from Roto Grinders has been trying to get me on him, and I think I was late to the party, but he's really been playing pretty solid. So 77 for him, I do think is a pretty good value. Go down the list a little bit. Carlos Ortiz has been playing really well. Doesn't have the best course history, but he's on my list. And then Scott Piercy from really a birdie or better rate. Like, he's one of those guys that I think we've talked about this on a podcast before with Axis, where like there's some guys, man, that they don't show up statistically, but they play well. There's been different examples of that. Like Wyndham Clark's one. He's not on my list this week, but there's some guys that just they keep making a ton of birdies, and just because they're not popping up on Strokes Gained Approach doesn't mean they're bad plays. So I do like there for Scott Piercy, Carlos Ortiz, and Daniel Berger because it's Berger season.
Berger season. We're not in Florida yet. Berger is Florida is the Florida.
Those Bermuda greens last week, man. He's true. He's just continuing the trend. Yep. He's probably gonna win the Honda Classic
when all of DFS is there. Just
yes,
absolutely. Like the entire season. DFS community.
I'm gonna make a
Berger's
sign.
gonna be like 90% owned that week because the whole DFS community is gonna be at the Honda Classic, sweating Berger on the 72nd hole.
So excited.
Yeah,
so excited.
Couple of guys I like. I mean, you nailed a couple of them. Ortiz was superstar on my list there. Harris English, I also love this week. Bud Cauley is somebody who I think, his putter is just so good. And I know that, most guys are, fade long-term fade putting and play approach, but Cauley's been playing well and he's back. I think he's finally recovered from his injuries in that car accident.
Yeah.
And, it seems like his form is taking shape. He didn't pop extraordinarily well in a lot of the stat categories, except for long-term scoring, scrambling and putting. But I think that you can kind of rely on him. And like I said, my first two notes for the past 3 years have been, it's a birdie fest and don't blow up on the stadium course. And I think that he is somebody that probably won't blow up on the stadium course. And so if you can rely on him to make enough birdies to stay in contention, he's got some top 10 upside. So he's probably my main play that you didn't mention there. I do like Piercy. I tilt his putter so much, and it was probably worse last year and the year before. But you're right, he makes a lot of birdies, and he has for a while. But his putter just goes so cold sometimes, where he's that guy. He's basically, I don't want to say a worse version, but a boiled down version of Ben Hahn, where it's like, oh yeah, he's got 3 feet. That's not a lock anymore.
No.
So I do like Piercy though. And then the one that you didn't mention, or another one you didn't mention, is Andrew Putnam.
Putter.
He's another one that he makes a lot of birdies.
Yeah.
And I talked about it a little bit, but this week it's kind of like a weekend golf week. Instead of like a full slate week, because you do get the 3 guaranteed rounds. You got 2 of the courses are just birdie fest, and the third one, it's a birdie fest that you just can't make a big number on, or you have to avoid the big number. So I like Putnam there. I think he can score well and finish, like 30th and score like he's finished 12th.
Yeah. Underrated.
So those are
stat.
some. Yeah. Seriously, and that'll be a differentiator this week. And the last one I'll mention, I know I already mentioned a handful, but Aaron Wise, he's another guy that I think he went. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago when Bubba went through his body transformation, and I feel like Aaron Wise did like the exact opposite, where he tried to bulk up last year. He's doing the Bryson. And it's like he tried to bulk up last year and played like crap for like the first half of the season, and then kind of sprinkled in some good events towards the end of the year. And I feel like, I know he didn't play well. Like, he didn't play terribly well last week, but it was a really, 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 really cold putter. Really cold. He averaged like 34 putts per round or something absurd. But he hit almost 80%. Yeah, and he hit almost 80% of greens. So
yeah, 34 putts per round.
Yeah,
lost 3 strokes putting.
that's not good. Over 2 rounds, lose 3 strokes.
You're right. He gained 2 strokes on approach last week. Just over neutral on off the tee. Like, pretty good ball striking. Just lost 3 strokes putting.
Yeah, so if he can put it close and the weather holds up, I think at 7,300, he's got the upside, I think, to contend. Again, it goes back to maybe not win equity per se, but he's kind of in that range.
He's got
where
the talent,
he could pop.
I would agree with that. It's weird how someone can come from just 2 years ago, although he's not quite on the Panda level, but a guy that's won the NCAA championship. Well, I mean, he was so good coming out of school. I mean, he was better than a lot of guys coming out of school. He was better than Brooks when he came out of school. And you go through a little rough patch, and you forget how naturally talented they are, and they can come out to any event and somehow just light it up. I can get behind that from a GBP.
The way I look at it is he's 23 years old with as many top 10s as probably 3/4 of the field. He won the Byron Nelson. He's got a whole bunch of top 5s, top 8s or whatever. I know it's not the same, and I know that it's kind of a crapshoot of a tournament, but 3rd at Bermuda a couple weeks or like a couple months ago, it was also a birdie fest. I'm not defending his 3 straight miscuts since then, but if you look at his putter, it did go ice cold. So I'm in on. I just think that his upside, especially when it goes to you're going to get your guaranteed 3 rounds. If he just turns it on, he could fire a 63 and just keep you in contention. So
yeah. I'm good with that. Let's see. The other 3 that I have started at the bottom, and then we'll get to the 6K range, then we'll wrap it up. But Kyle Stanley off of last week, I'm probably just going to keep riding that train at the price. Nick Taylor's pretty underrated in my opinion, man. I like him quite a bit. He hasn't popped enough to be recognizable to the DFS crowd, but man, if you look at his consistency, and I think last year he went on like a 7 straight made cut. It might have been him and Mac Hughes. Like, both of them were on some crazy cut streak. Both Canadians, actually. Ironic. But
here we go. I was waiting for it the whole podcast.
It's coming.
It's the Canadian week. Here we go.
I do like Nick Taylor. He's one of those, and we kind of talked about this before the pod too. When you start looking at longer term, you look at midterm, long term form, and then kind of playing out for the year. He's one of those that you would kind of look to every single week he's playing, see where he's priced, and see if it makes sense. I do think it makes sense at 7K. And then Harold Varner's the last one. Not a big Harold Varner guy, to be honest. But when I was looking through some different like key, and it was more just like for fun. I was looking at last week for some key approaches, and Ted Potter popped, and I was like, nah, that can't make sense. Sure enough, he played great. This week was 175 to 185, and I was looking at who was the best birdie average from that distance, and Harold Varner I think was number 2. So he's on my list. He actually finished 18th here last year. So a lot of the data can just be kind of like conjured up to fit the narrative. So don't take that with a large cup of sugar or something like that. Just something that I'm looking at this week. It kind of made sense last week. I'm going to see if it plays out this week.
Yeah, I think I won't go too far on here because I do have a whole bunch of guys and I don't want to list them all. But Nick Taylor is also on my list pretty hard. I'm kind of Varner will be on my cut line. I think whether or not I have him in my pool or not, I probably won't decide until he
just blows up. Like
yeah.
Like there's weeks where you don't play him, and like the Wyndham Championship I think was one, and it's like okay, he's gonna burn me. He was 7,300, he's gonna win, or 7,900, he's gonna win, and he shoots 90. Like I'm good.
Yeah.
So he's a tough one to roster because he is he's all over the nice guy. But from a DFS standpoint, dude, he is a tough one to watch if you're following along from Thursday to Sunday.
Yeah. I can get behind Nick Taylor, though. He was another one that when I looked over kind of his long-term putting average versus how he's putted the past 2 weeks, I think long-term, he's kind of around the 29 adjusted number that I'm looking at on labs. But his last 2 weeks, he was like 3 strokes worse than that, each of them. And he hit over 80% of greens last week. He hit almost 90% of greens at the RSM Classic and missed the cut because he putted 32 putts per round.
Who was that? Taylor?
Yeah.
Huh.
It was like
88.9%
greens regulation at the RSM, and he missed the cut.
Yeah, last week same way, 81% of greens. So
yeah, exactly. So I'm on Taylor. I think HV3 kind of it'll go hit or miss, but I can hop into the 6K range.
Let's go ahead and down there. The only guy that I like down here so far that I'm going to mention is going to be super chalky, so I can't go out too far on a limb. Is Cameron Davis, and now I will let you have the floor to let me know who's this week's Bo Hoag.
So this week's Bo Hoag is actually Harry Higgs.
No.
Yep. Yeah. He scores, man. He does. He makes a lot of birdies. I don't need him to finish top 10 if he's scoring like he's in top 10. So here's a quick stat for you. Last week he finished 57th, right? It's like, oh man, that sucks. 57th. Yeah, but he had one fewer birdie than like most of the guys who finished at 28th or better. Or it was like 28th or 32nd. He had one fewer birdie.
One eagle, 13 birdies last week.
Yeah, so he just goes off, scores like crazy. You got 3 guaranteed rounds. You got 2 birdie fest guaranteed rounds. And if he blows up on Stadium, just hope he makes the cut so that he can blow up on Stadium again on Sunday. I mean, so I'm not going to put him. He's not quite in the Bo Hoag or the Kevin Na category of lock.
He's had a rough start, just by the way.
Yeah.
It's not 2020. Nah, is not going to work.
Yeah, you'll notice I did not mention Kevin Na.
He's got good course history too. I was waiting for it. So
yeah. But no, so I'm in on Harry Higgs. I think that this week he's kind of primed. He does well at scorer type of events. Safeway 23rd. That's a birdie fest. Missed cut at Sanderson is kind of concerning, but that was also like 4 months ago now. And then he, second at Bermuda in early November, another birdie fest, and hit a lot of greens last week. Again, it was just, and he hit a lot of greens, made a bunch of birdies, and missed a bunch of par putts to make bogey. So So I'm in on Harry Higgs. I think he really is like my favorite play, I think, in the 6K range right now. So for everybody who, for some godforsaken reason, will actually listen to and or tail me, you can pretty much lock in that I'm going to have like 15% or more Harry Higgs.
I like the scoring, man, but man, I just can't. Like, I think we talked about this before for branding, and he's a tough one to just put on the brand.
Hey, I'm not looking to brand them for the year. I'm looking to brand them for the week.
For your paycheck this week. Brand the
paycheck.
Exactly.
Three guaranteed rounds.
I like it, man. I like the idea, though. The birdies stood out a ton just last week.
Yeah. DJ Trahan is also in my pool right now. He's grading out really well. There's another one, makes a bunch of birdies, makes a decent amount of eagles. But yeah, so those two guys are probably my favorite. I think everybody's going to gravitate towards either Sam Ryder or to your boy Davis and Scott Harrington.
Davis,
who, by the way, I'm not against any of those guys, and they probably will end up in my
Cameron
pool.
Davis, yeah. Sorry,
Cameron Davis, yeah. Sorry, yeah. They probably will end up in my pool, but yeah, the guys I'm probably going heaviest on are going to be Trahan and Higgs. But again, full disclosure for everybody, I'm playing 150 lineups. So if I were playing 3-max, I don't know if I would need to go down that far because I do love a lot of the 7K range. And like I only mentioned probably half of the guys that I'm going to end up playing in the 7K range. So yeah, so take that for what it's worth. But I do love those two guys in particular.
So I got one for you down here that I was looking at, and it's strictly there's two. We kind of joked about it for first off when we talked about Hubbard going from.
Oh God, let's go.
He was like, what was he, 7,200 or right around 7K, and he was Chalk City.
And now he's 61 and 61 still
and
makes
no
birdies, and you got 3 guaranteed rounds.
Yeah. So the other one though is Shelton at 6,200. So let me just you like to use, I mean, anyone smart is going to use, different length time frames for any of their stats. But like looking at last week, just for Robbie Shelton, he gained almost 2 strokes off the tee. He lost 2 strokes approach. It's like, okay, that's fine. He hit 67% of greens, not the end of the world. He lost 3 strokes around the green, lost 2.5 strokes putting. So in total, he lost 5.5 strokes around the green and putting.
That's absurd.
Yeah. So for me, he was one of the guys. He did stand out when you look at Vegas odds. He did have 5 birdies the first 2 rounds. It's really not anything groundbreaking. It was really windy, so I don't actually know what the birdie average was for rounds 1 and 2. But the 9 bogeys, 2 doubles probably did him in. So he was one on the list, though, when you talk about super cheap, making lineups work. He stood out to me.
And that's Shelton you're talking about.
That's Shelton,
there.
Yeah.
I have nothing to say against that. I think, in general, as I look, maybe this is a little bit of a tangent, but in general, as I look at this entire slate, like I said, I'm not playing a ton of the 8K range. I'll have a sprinkle because I'll probably need to fill in some guys, and there's probably more equity there than in the high 7K range. But I like a lot of the 7K range, and there are a bunch of guys in the 6K range that I would not feel terrible going down with the ship with. So, and I'm willing to gamble a little bit more because, like I mentioned, it's kind of a weekend slate-ish type of a deal where you just need to accumulate as many birdies over 3 rounds and you're probably making the cut. So having said all of that, I don't hate a little bit extra gamble this week. I think a lot of guys are going to look at, especially in cash, they're going to be, oh man, this guy's cut equity is X. It's like, well, that's cool, man. Like I can go play Higgs at 6,900 then he'll make 4 more birdies than the guy that you picked to make pars, basically. And they probably and over the guy that you picked to make pars, and he'll score an extra maybe 20 finishing position points. So it's or 20 places, I should say.
Yeah.
So
I do think that's a pretty subtle note though, like as far as like the weekend stuff. Because, 3 rounds versus 4 rounds, the made cut equity is really not the big ticket here. It's scoring. You could look at win equity if you want, but I do think, like, the more I'm thinking about it now, you compare, like, a Harry Higgs to someone that's steady, that's cheaper. They could finish the same position. They both miss the cut or something, but the birdies is going to get it done. Or if they both make the cut, but the birdies are still going to get it done. So the volatility, if you look at DK scoring, the birdies is definitely going to be weighted a lot higher. So I like that idea for it's like a showdown slate. You're right. It's almost like a no cut event. It's just taking out 18 holes.
It's like toss out Bill Haas's, whatever his terrible stretch of tournaments, and you pretty much have a guy in the high 6K range who isn't going to make a lot of birdies, who's going to go out there and just hit the ball down the fairway and make par on a whole bunch of holes. And you know what? On a normal week, that would be great. But if I'm going to get 3 rounds out of them, I'd rather take somebody that with a little bit more gamble that I can say, hey, they're going to go out there and just aim for the pin every time and try to shoot the course record every day. And I'm not saying obviously their likelihood of getting anywhere close to that is low, but I'd rather have somebody out there gambling than yeah.
I'm with you.
So with all that, I think that matters. The only other thing I wanted to mention too is that you guys did that pod yesterday, and one of the big pieces I took from that was having the multiple models, and like looking at different time periods and different stats and seeing who pops where, what, and why. And I think that's extraordinarily important for anybody who's coming out and trying to play PGA DFS. And I think the reason is because we see it all the time where everybody tends to look at the same stuff. And you said it at the top of the pod with, strokes gain data. It's like a lot of people have access to that now. Mm-hmm. And when everybody's looking over 24 rounds, who the number one birdie or better percentage is, it's like, okay, cool. That, like I said before, that guy's going to be chalk, and for better or for worse, he's going to be chalk. So trying to find different lenses to look at the data is super important, particularly for this week. And kind of, I guess, just, take everybody's stat hunting with a grain of salt, but also kind of be diligent and looking at it from a couple different angles to make sure you're right.
Yeah, especially early in the season too. It applies throughout the season, but with right now, most of these guys played last week. I should say some of these guys played last week. Most of them haven't played since the RSM Classic probably. It's just you want to look longer term, but look at last week. Get a shorter term sample, then look at even longer term sample. So I do think it's really important with golf. And they were kind of joking about it yesterday, and I know we went a little bit long, but just to kind of finish commentating on the Kansas City game, we talk about momentum. Golf's big for momentum, man. You look at it, someone that played Brendan Todd goes into the one event and wins. He carries that on and wins again. We don't see that very often, but in golf, momentum is pretty important. So I personally, just from my background, I almost always, I should say 100%. I should 100% always look at very recent form to see if anyone sticks out like a sore thumb, that it looks a little bit suspicious. Oh wow, this is unusual for them. Maybe I should look into it a little more and then go from there. Generally, longer term stuff is safer, but I do think with golf, man, you'll see some swings with especially cheaper guys, and that's like you mentioned Higgs. That's a perfect example of someone that from the surface no one would even click his name, but you look a little deeper, that's a shit ton of birdies. And on this type of event, I mean, seriously, I'm thinking through 13 birdies through 2 rounds. Holy shit! Or through 4 rounds but the leaders probably finished with the same amount.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I went through half of the people at 28th and 32nd, and he had more. He was one fewer birdie than all of them. It was all but 2 or something ridiculous. So, yeah.
I like it. That's good stuff. Let's wrap it up there. We have plenty of stuff for everyone to consume for this podcast. I'm sure we'll have you on again soon. Always appreciate you coming on the show. You very active in the Twitch live stream Wednesday night where we talk through kind of final thoughts, weather, and stuff like that. You're always a valuable source for guys in the chat. So again, Nick, really appreciate you participating and being a member and kind of giving us your input, giving us your play. So let's
happy to do it. The final comment I'll make is my Euro head-to-heads are also posted, and you can feel free to go follow Axis and Sky and all their Euro content. But if you don't do that, then go scoop my head-to-heads, because Nelson and I are sitting in the lobby and waiting for action. So that's all I'll say.
You didn't think far enough ahead, man. You should have came up with a different username, I suck
Whatever.
36 or something like that.
Whatever. I'm not hiding for anybody. They can come after me. It's all good.
When I first started DFS, man, that was the thing though. Like, if some name just looks stupid, then it's like, yeah, that's an auto play, and it's probably like Awesemo, because it's like, oh, that's a dumb name,
Yeah.
Awesemo. Who's gonna name themselves that? Then you lose. So, all
Yeah, right.
All right, guys. I appreciate you all tuning into the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast. Sorry it took a little bit longer, but hopefully you enjoyed some of these tidbits for strategy and kind of some added thoughts on process, especially for this week with the 3-course rotation. As always, you can find our information at fantasygolfbag.com. Fantasygolfbag.com/podcast will have the notes from this show. And, of course, you can leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. Always helps us out. So, with that, guys, good luck. We'll see you Wednesday night for the Wednesday night PGA DFS live stream. See ya.